I'm delighted to be here in the West Midlands Safari Park, which I was asking Isabel if it was deliberate that it looked quite like Jurassic Park as you drive in. I don't know if that was a deliberate style choice, but it evoked memories of that film. So, as you can see, my name's Ian Mackenzie. I'm Head of Nations and Regions at Channel 4. Hopefully, most of you know what Channel 4 is. What's the Nations and Regions Department? Well, we're tasked with working very closely and strategically with our colleagues in the TV commissioning team at Channel 4 to find, develop and support, via funding, the best, most ambitious and creatively excellent companies across the UK outside of London. Channel 4 is, at least as I speak to you today, a publicly owned, commercially funded publisher broadcaster. In plain English, that means no in-house production. That means all of our content is made by independent production companies. So a strong UK-wide indie sector is both an aspiration and a necessity for our own continued success and sustainability as a broadcaster. I think at this particular moment in time, when Channel 4's status and, as some of you may have read, even location, is very much part of an ongoing dialogue with government, though I admit the government appear to have a few other trifling matters to attend to at the moment. I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you all about our work across the UK and why I personally believe it's important and that it will hopefully continue to make an impact, and why I also personally believe that investing in great creative companies and talent is the true and best way that we can make a positive impact, not just here in the Midlands, but actually across all the regions of the UK. So, as always with these things, the main event, which is far more exciting, which is hearing from Colette Foster of Full Fat Television. You'll be hearing that in a moment. This is the boring preamble, and I will try and rush through it. But it is important because it hopefully sets the scene. So here's the really boring bit. As stipulated by Ofcom, who are our regulators, Channel 4 has to produce at least 35% of all its hours and spend outside of London on an annual basis. And within that, there's also a quota for the devolved nations, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland of 9%. Now, to try and give you some context, when you consider that we spend anywhere between £400 and £600 million a year on originating new UK content, that's a big opportunity for companies based right here in the Midlands. Now, how are we doing in this part of the world? If I'm really honest with you, I think we could be doing better. We have an aspiration to increase significantly our spend, commissioning spend, with key indie partners, both established and new, one of those new entities being Full Fat TV over the coming years. But it's also important to say some of our best and most impactful shows come from this part of the world. North One delivering the phenomenon that is Guy Martin, whether it be Wall of Death live or Speed with Guy Martin. He's been a fantastic success story for them and for the channel. And also Richard Ayoade in things like Travel Man and Gadget Man. I suppose if you're ever going to pitch either a gadget show or a travel show to Channel 4, there's the perfect example where a guy who hates gadgets and hates travelling presents a show about both subject matters. It would only be us who'd do that, I think. And of course, in relatively recent history, some of the most seminal shows anywhere in the Channel 4 schedules, the likes of Embarrassing Bodies through Maverick, have come from this part of the world as well. So very quickly, a little bit about me and my team. We fund anywhere between 10 and 20 indies annually, and that's specifically to try and push and augment their ideas development alongside our commissioning editor colleagues in London. Now, that funding, I'm happy to talk numbers, it's always best to be honest, that's anywhere between £10,000 and £30,000, and if that does its job, that helps indies resource their development and win commissions with the channel. Now, alongside the above, we run multiple commissioning briefings across the UK annually, but I'll also be the first to admit that given that Birmingham, or indeed the Midlands, has not been a huge supplier for us in terms of content over the last few years, we haven't had an event in this part of the world. Happy to say now that only earlier this week I thought if I'm going to go and speak in the West Midlands, I'd better have something to tell them that that's going to change. It will change from 2017 onwards, so just so you're aware. What we hopefully have here today in Colette Foster and Full Fat TV is a very good case study of how our Alpha Fund, which is our development fund, can support companies and help them build their profile with the channel to winning commissions and building their business. But very quickly from this presentation, there's 4 key things that if we're working with any partners, we need to be looking for. This is the moment of truth. So a creative track record, what does that mean? Well, we've got to be honest about where the bar is set. The Alpha Fund, whilst I suppose its name might suggest it's about brand new people, it can often just be about people who are new to Channel 4 or are new companies. We need people who have a track record in making television. So it's about what have you done elsewhere. That could be on the BBC, that could be on Channel 5, that could be on ITV, it may be a huge amount of short form content, but it's about a demonstrable track record that means if you're coming to pitch to Channel 4, it's with the idea that a commissioning editor will think, I think they could step up and deliver something that is along the lines of what they're pitching. A strategy for scale. Now, not everybody's going to have that. Success means different things to different people. Colette and I, just before we started this morning, we're talking about how I suppose you can see any sort of big commercial industry as being a bit of a pyramid. There's obviously a small number of very big suppliers at the top. There'd be a lot of people of a sort of a medium scale in the middle, and then a huge number of people, certainly who I'd encounter, who may only make a single documentary a year or bits and pieces of short form content. Now, the crucial thing for me today is because I'm under pressure to deliver numbers, so how much are we producing out of the Midlands? If somebody comes to me and says, success for me maybe means winning a single film from Channel 4 in the next 2 years, then my job with them is to connect them with the right commissioning editor. That commissioning editor has the power to develop that idea and commission it. Beyond that, that's not something I can back with development because it's not going to help us solve the problem of how we build scale. Because if you build scale with companies, it employs more freelancers, it means there are more opportunities in the overall marketplace. And that's what we need to get to in Birmingham and in other regional cities if we're going to have sustainable regional production on Channel 4. A talent focus, often on screen. Hopefully some of you, I know that there's a diversity session later on this morning, but something that is hugely important to Channel 4 is diversity on and off screen. Our 360 Diversity Charter launched a bit over a year ago, and what that is there to do is to challenge all production companies to reflect the diversity of life across the UK, not just in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of disability, in terms of sexuality, and in terms of regionality. That's hugely important to us, but it's also important for us to understand when a company comes to see us, what they believe their skills are, but that they're also aware of what skills they might need to bring in to deliver a great show. Lots of people can pitch us fantastic ideas, but they may not have either the directing or production experience to deliver that. So it's not necessarily about having all that in your company, but it's about having had the thought and the conversations either with your business partners or indeed just with peers about who can I bring in to help me ensure that I deliver a great show. And this is undoubtedly the most important. It would be great to be able to tell you that I have a limitless fund that can just, I can say yes to commissioning people right here today. But the crucial thing in all of this is building commissioning relationships. Now, that's something that me and my team are there to help with. We help broker relationships, make introductions, carry out briefings where there are opportunities to meet commissioning editors one-on-one. But if people are serious about winning business with Channel 4, it's about building relationships with the buyer, knowing what they've commissioned, knowing what makes them tick. It sounds simple, but it's such an important part of the process. So that's enough from me. I suppose it's now, I'd like to ask you all to welcome Colette Foster. We're now going to have a bit of a chat about Colette's experience of hopefully all of that, one way or another.
This is not my first time to Bewdley Safari Park. I have made many trips here, and I can and I can still remember my brother trying to get out the car when he shouldn't have been getting out the car. So it's familiar to me, although I've never been in this house before, which is spectacular, really spectacular.
No, great setting. So Colette, I think I'm right in saying I really have to thank you for giving up your time today. I'm glad to say Colette's time is rather limited at the moment because of Channel 4. Is that fair to say?
It's definitely Channel 4 making me work hard. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yes, I started Full Fat Television last September. And so we're a brand new company. We're based in Birmingham. I'm a Brummie, so that's why I'm back home, which is brilliant. Full Fat Television means we make programmes that are full of nourishing content. It also means we're a little bit naughty, but also very nice. And I'm sort of unashamedly a popular, factual programme maker. That's my background. And they're the type of shows that I've always made at the moment for Channel 4. We are making a show with Joe Wicks, the body coach, an Instagram sensation, which some of you may know about, others will know about soon. So we're making a show with him, and that's a fun, popular subject matter of food and exercise and positive body image, which is a fun show. In contrast to that, we have been commissioned to make a programme called 24 Hours Inside the Body, and we are pioneering the world's first body rig, which is a mixture of data collecting and shooting technology. And again, Birmingham is sort of right at the heart of it, of our development, because we're working with many of the departments in sports science and ageing, bizarrely, even though it's not about ageing, at Aston University and Birmingham University. So we've very much harnessed all areas of Birmingham in helping us get started with the programmes that we're making. I'm obviously doing things for other broadcasters, but we won't talk about those now.
No. I'm sure that'll be small frying. So that's now, Colette. I'm sure there's, well, I would imagine there'll be a few people wondering how you got to this point in the TV industry. I mean, tell us a bit about your background in production.
Very, very briefly, I joined the BBC straight from school, and my first job, appropriately, was working for the man who used to be Honorary Secretary of the Royal Television Society, Tony Pilgrim. So I joined straight from school, started as a secretary, became a live production assistant, and got my break as a director and then series producer on The Close Show. Yeah. And then you can see it's all popular factual. Gardener's World, Chelsea Flower Show, Ray Mears and Tracks. And I started making programmes for Channel 4 in 2004 and at Maverick Television, where we made shows of Embarrassing Bodies, like you mentioned, 10 Years Younger and How to Look Good Naked. Became MD of Remarkable Television, which is just going to go on and on if I keep going on about all the shows we've made. Quite a lot of Channel 4 shows, some big Channel 4 shows. So I've literally worked my way up the industry to managing director, and thought I need to come home. I was in London. We had lots of programmes that we were making in Birmingham, but thought there was a wonderful opportunity to come back home and do something in the regions. So I'm delighted to be doing it, especially with Channel 4 support.
Well, Channel 4 are delighted that you're doing it too. I mean, I think I can't I don't think people should underestimate how important it is for me if you're running a nations and regions department, when somebody who's making great stuff says, I actually want to go and make it in that particular locale that I'm from, or I want to move back to and still deliver great television. We'd love to hear more people saying the same. But hopefully somebody like Colette doing that just encourages people in this part of the world to think, I'll make my television career from here. Yeah. So you've now set up Full Fat, and we've just heard some of these commissions are starting to come off, which is great to hear. But you mentioned that role at Remarkable, and I suppose what's interesting for me is, you see a mixture of scale of company in our industry. Could you compare and contrast being at a place like Remarkable and now sort of almost going back to the beginning and running your own company? What's that been like? I don't know how much you want to share.
Sometimes when you say that, it sort of fills me with horror, because we were just saying about can you compare and contrast? Because there are some really positive things about being part of a huge company. Not least, you're all in it together. You don't feel like it's just down to you to make every critical decision about what you do next. So whether I'm buying a kettle or trying to work out where to get a commission, every decision is monumental when you're a small company. A large company gives you infrastructure, you have legal departments, financial departments, you have all of those things. But ultimately, I think if you want to make television programmes, I've always believed that you have to be creatively focused and find space for those other things. They're all critically important. Making tea for the team is just as important as me bringing in some business. But I've found, regardless of the scale, you have to be single-mindedly determined to make television, because it's really tough. It's definitely not easy. I would say that because of my track record, I probably thought I'd be making 3 series by now. I thought, that's fine, I've been doing this for years, everybody knows me, I'll be fine. But nothing nothing is easy. It's a tough industry, but that's also part of the fun of it, I think. You've just got to work on a 99% failure rate, is my theory.
Yeah, as long as everybody's comfortable with that. But yeah, I would agree. Just actually going back into that, what we were touching on earlier, why do you think that so you've got that creative track record, but and this is probably something that maybe shines a bit of a light on where some of the specific challenges department by department are in Channel 4. Why do you think it is that it's been quite difficult for them to say yes to a series and instead they've gone more down the pilot route?
Well, part of me could think they want me to prove myself just because I've run a huge company and we're starting from scratch. They would also, a broadcaster would understand that when you are starting a company from scratch, there are lots of things to preoccupy you. And the most important thing a broadcaster wants is to know that you're going to deliver a premium product. So there's no sense of entitlement. I don't expect to get any favours. I think if you can deliver something, you're referring to your sense of scale, I think if you can prove yourself with something, then it builds confidence. I don't think anything is easily won. We're working hard, we're pitching the whole time, we're developing lots of ideas, and we want the broadcasters to be confident in what we do. We all know, probably working in the industry, that viewers, tracking them down, keeping them, the change in trends, the different genres of programmes that become popular one minute and not the next, means that broadcasters are looking for different areas where they might want to commission. So I'm of the firm belief that popular factual will always be a part of the schedule. But we've got to be constantly innovating. That's the point. We have to go in with something that they haven't seen before. And it's interesting about 24 Hours Inside the Body. The reason it's been commissioned is because we're pioneering the world's first body rig. If we said we're going to come in and make another health show, it's not going to get commissioned. It's always about innovating an area that's familiar, that the audience likes, but we've got something fresh to excite them with. I think that's the key. And with that comes risk. There's no doubt about it. If you're doing something as ambitious as that idea is, the capacity is there for it to fail. Obviously, that word does not come into our vocabulary on a day-to-day basis, but there's risk with that. So the concept is clear and exciting, but we didn't begin to think about the ethics of what it would mean to start collecting data from somebody who lives 24 hours of their lives in front of a camera. So all the time, if the shows feel a bit scary to make, we feel like we're in the right direction. And so that would make sense why perhaps a broadcaster would only say, let's try one first.
And has that been a mantra for you throughout the career? Is wherever possible, if it's feeling a bit scary, it's pushing the envelope, that feels like we're in the right zone. Is that fair to say? Completely.
And I wouldn't want this to sound wrong, but it might do. But I've had a great experience working in London, even though Remarkable had a Birmingham office for half of that time. We were very busy making shows in Birmingham. But the reason I think that more programming needs to come out of London is that even if you end up in London, you sort of absorb their lifestyle and their outlook and their way of living. And I think my early success with Channel 4, which was flipping hard because I'd worked at the BBC, made shows that people just happily watched every week, proving your credentials to Channel 4 was difficult. But what I think that we were able to bring to them were completely different ideas. Sort of 10, as I say, they're old shows now, but sort of 10 years younger was not a cool show. It wasn't. How to Look Good Naked was not a cool show, and Embarrassing Bodies was, very much, we're going to take health by the proverbials, and we started talking about leaky bottoms, and I just don't believe that anybody hanging around Soho House would have come in with any of those ideas. And so I always think that we have so much more to offer outside of London, and my feeling is from the commissioners we speak to, they say that you're pitching us stuff that nobody else is pitching. And I think that's a huge value for us to have outside of London.
Great. I mean, so Colette, we were delighted actually, me and a colleague, Addy Rawcliffe, in different forms have supported full fat TV, I suppose, from an early stage when you first sort of set up. Would you mind talking a bit about that process and warts and all, good and bad, from your perspective, and how it's hopefully helped you establish the indie, or how much it's helped you establish the indie?
Yeah. So you can run a big company and you can work at really tiny companies, but when you start from day one and all you can see is how am I going to build this from zero, it's terrifying. And again, it would have been very simple to say, oh, I'll do it in London because it's much easier there and everything will be fine. So it was actually with Addy and Ralph and Ian and Susie before you that I said, I'm really scared about doing this. This is a monumental thing to do, and I want to bring in people who I know are brilliant, but I'm going to be working with people I've never worked with before. And being in the Midlands, for me, a huge part of that is diversity. I might be white, but I'm from an Irish Catholic background. I'm also older, so I felt a different form of diversity. But I think for me being in Birmingham, it was about talking to Channel 4 and their key values, which I feel I want to have for Full Fat to have as well. And knowing I had nothing to go on, I wanted to employ a development producer. And the process was actually very, very positive. I'm trying to think about whether there were any pitfalls. They're not pitfalls, it's just that you have to make a very good case. Nobody's going to give you something for nothing. So the process was saying, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to employ Pajit as my senior development producer. I want to bring her back to Birmingham. She was working in London. She's going to give up guaranteed work. I would like to offer her a 6-month contract, but I can't actually afford to hire her with that. And I made a very good case for why I wanted to employ her, what her skill set was, how she would work to help us bring new ideas and fresh thoughts to Channel 4's commissioning slate. And so I would say the process was actually quite simple in the way that make your case, be passionate about what your case is, and actually you listened to me and you made that case, which was great, and have gone on to support Pajit. I mean, needless to say, I would have found a way to employ her because she's brilliant at what she does, but it meant that I could bring her back to Birmingham and give her some job security, and now she's living in Leamington Spa. You know, that's it. So her life is firmly, her career and life is back in the Midlands. But I think you're right. What I want to be able to do is to make, in the way that I had fantastic opportunities starting at the BBC, I want to employ people at the beginning of their career, not always people from the top. And it's about who we identify. I was straight from school. I'd love to do exactly the same for the next generation. Let's bring up the next generation and let's make sure that they reflect society as broadly as possible, because I think that's where the new, fresh ideas are going to come from.
Absolutely. So Colette, looking across the production sector and hearing about some of your experiences, there's a huge range of companies. You've been very, very open about the fact that popular factual is sort of where your ideas come from, where you see yourself and where you see your company going. There's all forms of genre within Channel 4 where people pitch in, win business, and different companies have different strengths. So I suppose I always think with that, there's intangibles that go with success in different areas, and so establishing a successful indie, maintaining the success of that indie. What tips might you have? They might be unusual tips, they might be small tips for anyone either looking to establish themselves as a supplier to Channel 4. It might not just be Channel 4, it might be other broadcasters. They might want to establish themselves, or they might be established and thinking, how do I maintain this? You know, I suppose that just comes back to your experiences, both at Remarkable and now at Full Fat.
I know you were going to ask me this question, and it almost feels like the answer is as elusive as it is to gain a commission, really, because I think my approach has been, what do I want to make? But more than that, what do I think the audience wants to watch? So I've always also believed, do what you're good at. Don't try and think, oh, I'm going to go over there and see if I can have a go there. I've been quite single-minded in the type of programs I want to make, and not diluting my time and energy into too many different areas, because your time and energy can be diluted just making one program, let alone anything else. If somebody wanted to start a company from scratch, I can tell you it's the most extraordinarily exciting thing to do. It's brilliant, but you do have to have a great deal of determination.
Sure.
Sorry, I just realised I can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear?
Sorry.
Sorry, people should have said. Can you?
We're nearly finishing now, aren't we? I'm hoping we're nearly finishing.
Hoping people at the back heard something.
Could you not hear us? Could you hear us? No? You could hear us, so fine. Okay.
We'll project even
yeah,
more.
I'm going to project because I thought I'm loud most of the time. You just have to stay focused, but you have to subdivide your life very, very strategically into remaining creatively driven, I think, but knowing that you cannot let anything else fall away, because whether it's compliance and legal things or financial things, but most importantly, looking after your staff and your team. And I've been very fortunate they're sharing our drive and determination to make a success of what we do. It's exhausting. You just need to know it's really, really tough, but I would fully recommend it. I fully recommend it. And if I'd probably seen Ian's description of what you're supposed to do to get a commission, I would have probably given up a long time ago. And so what I would say is, when I first started making shows for Channel 4, I absolutely felt like an outsider. I will not deny it. I'd spent my career at the BBC, thought I knew what I was doing. Understanding different broadcasters is a critical part of the message, I suppose. Nothing is easily won. You have to really, really prove yourselves, no matter how experienced you might be elsewhere. But it also creates a great sense of satisfaction when you do it. It's definitely tough, but I think we all know that anyway. It is tough. So I suppose my other bit of advice is, the broadcasters want hits every much as we do. So just try to stay focused on that, because I think if you've got something and you're as passionate, if you can remain passionate about what you want to do, then you'll get there. And if it's a disaster, so what? As long as everybody's tried their best, I think there's always room for people to appreciate that everybody tried their best and it didn't work. So be prepared for a bit of failure along the way. As I say, don't use that word very often because I don't believe it, because you just pick yourself up and move on from it. But I'd like to thank Channel 4, and I'm not saying that just because I've been invited to do this. I do genuinely believe there's a real commitment from them to want to be outside of London, but I think it's now up to all of us to step up and show that we can absolutely deliver, and I've got 100% confidence that we can. I think that's an absolute given.
Great, thank you so much, Colette. I'm conscious we have maybe a little bit of time left. Yeah, just, I mean, really on anything, and I mean anything I've said about Channel 4, any more details people want. I'm sure what Colette had to say was a lot more interesting though, so any questions to Colette as well? Yes?
With your current company, have you ever made anything prior to it being commissioned? As a fake company, and said, we've made this, are you interested in it? Or have you always had a commissioning first and then said, no, now we've got the budget for you, we'll go ahead and make it?
Always a commission first. You could spend an awful lot of money and not find a buyer. You might be able to do that if you're Richard Branson or someone, but I think you have to, because if the process works the best way, you both believe in the project. The broadcaster believes in it as much as you do. So if you've already made something, they have got no part in that creative process. And I think that's that's the reason. It's not just a financial thing. I think that's the way to. So probably the one thing we haven't talked about is how long it takes to get a commission, actually, and sometimes you get them extraordinarily quickly, but on the whole, it's sort of 9 months from first pitching an idea to it going into production. Takes about 9 months, so that's a long time. Waiting for something to come off, and that's where the perseverance, you really do have to take commitment, because it's easy to think, oh, maybe they don't like that idea anymore. So that's where you have to keep driving. But I wouldn't personally make something. I'd make a taster tape. I'd definitely invest money on shooting a taster tape of some talent or a format, because that excites them, but not a whole programme.
Hi, Colette.
Hi, Tommy.
Terrific to see you get full back up and running in Birmingham, in the heart of the Midlands. How much of a challenge is it selling talent outside of London into commissioners who are invariably
Behind the scenes or on front of?
production,
Um,
off-screen?
well, there is still a really strong body of talent in Birmingham. There's no doubt about that. You know, through in indies largely, but latterly we were all trained at BBC Birmingham. So there's incredible craft skills as well as production skills, and I imagine that it helps that I've got a long track record, and that means that I can say we're going to try out somebody new who you don't know. So I suppose I've got a mixed economy of people with really good reputations and experience, which allows us then to bring up the next generation. So we've got, you know, a guy who's shooting his first primetime show, who's 25 years of age. You know, I think you have to have that mixture, but I think Channel 4 absolutely could be accused of outrageous snobbery in the past about its talent, but if somebody hadn't given me a break, how would I have got this job? You've just got, but I think it's a slightly paternal relationship. I think the broadcasters need to know that somebody is looking after that new talent, and then it can work. So it's mixed. It's definitely a mixture.
That's my follow-up for you, Ian.
Yeah.
Lots of talk about Channel 4 and where they should be based. You know, your role is kind of in a director of nations and regions. Is there anything about some of the rumours about it potentially moving to Birmingham that you're able to share with us?
Well, well, I don't. Well, firstly, to declare, I don't have a house in Islington, so it isn't greatly concerning me having to move to Birmingham. I can't really speak to that because it is kind of speculation at the moment. Where I come at it from is the role that I play is sort of, it's a strategic role within commissioning. You might think this is party line. It's more what I believe. I think there's more value to investing in creative companies and talent outside of London than there is moving lots of bums to a different seat in a different city. That's just my opinion, because I think that's all money that's sort of spent behind the scenes before you then. And does it? It might help producers based in Birmingham, which is great. Would it help the rest of the nations and regions any more than them currently being based in London? To be discussed, I suppose. I think my position on it is, if it means that we make a commitment and we invest more and we work harder with independent production companies based in this part of the world, but based essentially outside of London more than anything else. I think everything that's happened politically in the last couple of weeks speaks to the way that London fails to reflect the rest of the UK. And if Channel 4 is doing its job alongside its remit, it's reflecting diversity of life across the whole of the country. So the best way you do that is, to Colette's point, you commission people who are from those parts of the world, who have different viewpoints and a different experience in life. That's probably dodging your question to some extent, but
Probably another whole session you could
It's really interesting though, because we still have to go to London to see every broadcaster. So if often you get invited to events in Manchester or Bristol, and you think, well, actually, I may as well just go to London, because if I'm going to pay a rail fare, I want to scoop up lots of things. And I'm the same. It might make us feel more sizable, but I think let's make more programmes. We don't necessarily need the back room. I think we just want to make more programmes, don't we?
So,
For Colette, from starting out, is there any sort of key piece, quite broad, any key piece of advice you'd give to somebody else starting out which you wish you'd had at the start? Which, if somebody had given it to you, would have made a big difference? Or is it, no?
Just believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Just believe in what you want to do, because we spend most of our lives not. Probably I would have started it 20 years ago if I thought that. It's a very risky industry, our industry. I don't think you can't, it's not like you make one widget and then you can make 10 widgets and then 1,000 and then 100,000. Every widget is different. So, but what I do believe is you become better at what you do the whole time, and you understand more. And if you're passionate about it, just believe in what you do. I think that's the secret, really. Not second guessing what anybody else wants.
yes.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. First of all, I thought Embarrassing Bodies was a very courageous and brilliant programme.
Yes.
And it's nice to see that Full Fat have come back to Birmingham, and I hope that the BBC will learn a little bit more from that. And Channel 4 welcome as well, because a lot of us have been fighting with the BBC for production in the Midlands. It's got a wealth. I'm curious to find out with research as well, when you're looking at commissioning programmes. I'm fascinated by the research you mentioned, Colette, about what people would like to see in the future. And I'm just wondering what sort of research that is done to get the feedback to make these programmes.
In terms of the programmes that we come up with and develop
Yes.
and pitch,
Yes.
it's a fairly visceral process, really. And again, that's why you need such a mixture of people working for you, because it's about life experience for me most of the time. So Embarrassing Bodies is a really good case in point. I remember just sitting at a table a bit like this one morning, and we were about to send some ideas off to Channel 4 and thought, what am I worried about? I used to think, there was a whole phase when my programmes were all based about what did I worry about, my health. So I'd make a programme about it. So what we're competing with is the pace at which ideas and innovation are now coming from the digital world. And we've got to try and harness that cleverness and immediacy, but not alienate the traditional TV viewer. So I think that all the time we're marshalling my traditional television background with what younger members of the company what they're digesting and consuming. And it could be what's happening in their lives or what they're reading about. But there's absolutely no science to it. We don't pay for any research. We don't do anything like that. We watch a lot of television. We look at the figures, we discuss those programmes, and we work out where can we capitalise on it. But even saying that sounds strategic. It's not that strategic. It's like, we need an idea.
I suppose to give a Channel 4 perspective on that, we were doing one of my colleagues in the Audience Insights team who do quite a bit of research in this area, and it's looking at, audience profile, what people are watching, how much they're watching, because I think there were various prophecies put out about 10 years ago of the death of scheduled television and the death of linear shows. People are watching maybe about half an hour less sort of live television than they were 10 years ago, but they're still watching, well, in some parts of the UK, I don't know how they manage this, 6 hours of television a day, but the average is still about 4 hours. And of course, things like PVR viewing and people watching on tablets and things like that has become a big factor. But for us, it's an interesting thing. We were talking about, the Channel 4 always says our core audience is 16 to 34-year-olds, and the reason for that is advertising sales want to target those people. They watch the least amount of television, they're the hardest to reach. So if you can get your products in front of those people, and the other element is ABC One, so the people theoretically with more disposable income, then you can potentially sell more advertising. Would anybody like to hazard a guess at what the actual average age of the Channel 4 audience is? You're pretty close, so it's so yeah. So it's.
Where you are in your life, the time you have, after throwing children in bed and all of that, you're sitting like this.
Yeah, so it's 48, and I think, and I mean,
Blimey, even I'm surprised at that. I've never heard that figure. Are we allowed to tell people that?
well, yeah, I mean,
I've never
yeah,
heard that number.
we've shared it because I think that's the thing is actually, you know, we're not about saying the rest of the audience doesn't matter. It's purely about saying the bit of the audience that's most important and most valuable to us being a sustainable business is that bit. So I suppose to some extent, I think the companies who are getting it right manage to reflect to some extent either the worries or the aspirations of people at certain stages in their lives. And I suppose what I find quite interesting about stuff that has sustained generation by generation, one of the key regional productions we have that comes out of Scotland, location, is a property show. The aspiration to buy a house still appears to have endured despite despite all manner of things like financial crashes and things like that. But also at the heart of that show, it's a way of nosing about other people's houses. Who doesn't like doing
exactly.
that? You know, that's sort of why it's endured.
Yeah.
So.
I'd just like to add as well, it's great to see how many productions and TVs are coming back into Birmingham. We've now got a new TV station about 2 years now, Big Centre TV, and it's great to see the growth back into Brook and may continue.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to ask you said something that really excited me. Everything is exciting, of course. One thing that really excited me is that you said if somebody came to you who was kind of relatively new, you would sort of help them stabilise, because I think the access is the problem. When you're starting out, you're full of your vim and your vigour, but if you don't have the commissioning relationships, I'm grateful that we don't have to trek to London anymore, but if you don't have the commissioning relationships, how does that process work? I mean, how do you know, if you're a small production company and you've got a great set of ideas, well, you ain't got that track record. I've made lots of things, but not as far as, you know, embarrassing bodies. And my expertise comes from being hired through drama, but I'm kind of switching streams.
Maybe it's easiest if I give you an example of a company I worked with over a few years. So a company in Wales who actually make lots of Welsh language content, but they brought somebody in to try and start winning UK network business. A lot of that was to do with the fact that S4C's budgets were receding, and the company overall were saying, how do we sort of future-proof ourselves a bit? Because our main source of income is S4C. So they were not known to Channel 4. They pitched a whole lot of ideas, weren't getting traction. So a lot of what it was for me was being a broker to some extent and helping set up meetings, helping go to those meetings and say, what you need to do is start getting into the mindset of the commissioning editors. Because whilst a lot of people are keen to believe that the last thing they want to do is commission a regional company, actually, because they know it's a strategic imperative of Channel 4 and that they'll be really popular with Jay, their boss, Jay Hunt, who's the Chief Creative Officer, it's absolutely in their interest. But sometimes they need help because actually what they're under pressure, on a day-to-day basis, they're just under pressure to find a hit. And that's hard. It's like you're going with as much sort of analysis as you reasonably can, but sooner or later you're going with a bit of a gut instinct and hoping people will want to watch this. And so when you add into the mix, here's somebody I don't know and I haven't worked with before, that's a challenge. So what we did over time was this company brought an idea called, it was just called Tattoo at the time. And my old boss, who knows Colette very well, Stuart Cosgrove, who ran Nations and Regions at Channel 4 for many years, he said, doubt this will work, it's stuck in a precinct, which isn't that interesting, but I tell you what, let's give them an opportunity to pull a taste of tape together, see what happens. So they did. Off the back of that, I just left the disc on one of the Doc's editor's desks and said, look, have a look at this, I think it's quite good. She phoned them up 2 days later and said, I really like this access you've got, could you make a single? They then made a 3-part series as well called My Tattoo Addiction. Now, they are still kicking themselves at the fact that Studio Lambert have since swept in and made the mega hit that is Tattoo Fixers, but there's a case where people sort of stumble upon a precinct which increasingly, I mean, I don't personally have a tattoo, but clearly lots of people in the UK do. It's a massive industry, and clearly the industry of fixing them is increasingly massive as well. But it was interesting, they came at it from quite a documentary perspective, whereas another company then looks at it and says, oh, there's something you could do that's a bit more formatted in that space, and actually, I suppose, steals from a lot of the things that come out of health shows as well. You know, it's somebody comes in with a problem, how are you going to solve it? Yeah. You know, how do you get the outcomes? So, but they were an example of a company who'd never made anything for Channel 4 before, and there are numerous examples where we stepped in and said, right, Alpha Fund money can hopefully help bolster that development relationship. But what I won't lie to you about is it is down to that production company to build the relationship with the commissioning editor, because I don't have either the money or the power to just say to them, look, have a go, here's the tariff for a documentary. It'd be quite nice if I did. It'd feel very philanthropic, but
you
it's...
mentioned yourself as a broker, and I can see that you kind of like set people up, and then it's up to the individual and the company to do their work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Can I ask
Oh.
you all to show your appreciation for Ian and Colette?
Whether they heard us or not, I don't know.
I hope they did.